Hello and welcome. You're listening to.
Hurry! The movie is starting podcast.
All right, welcome. Today, I'm honored to introduce today's guest, someone who has been working in film for over 35 years, whether it's been as a cinematographer, screenwriter, director, actor, or author. Mr. Steven Bernstein, DGA, ASC, WGA, has had a remarkable career. Just some of the films that you worked on that I want to mention. We have Underworld over there, Bulletproof, which is a classic movie from back in the day, Half Baked, another comedy that I kind of grew up with later on in my life. The Waterboy, Scary Movie 2, which is another classic movie. And one of the movies that I hadn't recently heard of, but once we set up this interview, I was able to go in and actually watch it, Decoding Annie Parker, which was made in 2014, which you actually went on to win the Alfred P. Sloan Award in Hamptons International Film Festival. And I wanted to talk about this movie briefly specifically for a second, because my nana was actually going through a situation where she just recently survived, not recently, about a couple of years ago now, but seems recent when all these things happen. She was a breast cancer survivor, and she actually had a mastectomy as well. And watching this movie, it reminded me more so of that instance of her going through those struggles that she was going through at that time. And it caused me to reach out to her daughter and ask a little bit more about like the cancer in her family and whatnot. And it turns out that it wasn't just my grandma; it was a couple of her sisters, it was her aunt, it was a grandmother on her side. So it was something that ran very rampant within our family. So I just wanted to show my appreciation for you creating that movie, and we see like the dichotomy of them discovering the genes and then the character actually going through.
Yeah, we make all sorts of films and for all sorts of different reasons. I mean, people talk about the film industry, and when you say film industry, you think that therefore it's principally a business. And certainly for the studios and the investors, it may well be. But it's also an art form that reaches millions of people. And the function of art is many and varied, one of which is to inform about important issues, to tell people that they're not alone, to remediate our experience of the world by seeing the world through someone else's eyes, standing in someone else's shoes, and also to touch people, to move them emotionally. That's the function of art. Now, because film costs so much money to make, people sometimes forget the artistry that's involved. But on Decoding Annie Parker, it was very much about the experience of having cancer, surviving cancer, of the important research that Mary Claire King, one of the principal characters in that story, undertakes, revolutionizes our understanding of all modern cancer therapies and treatments. Really important events, very different from Half Baked, which is not about cancer, or about world-changing events. Both serve a function, though. I mean, Half Baked makes you laugh, which makes life easier to tolerate, and Decoding Annie Parker teaches us something about the human spirit. I think both have their value.
Yeah, and I agree. And they're two different mediums, but at the same time, they get you to where you're trying to go. Was it difficult for you to specifically like channel in from movies like Half Baked, Scary Movie to Little Man, to movies to your first directorial debut into 2014 as doing Decoding Annie Parker?
Well, the great thing about being a cinematographer first, although I first started as a writer, and then I transitioned to cinematography, music videos started to happen in the 80s, and I had access to a camera and just began shooting and enjoyed cinematography, and then began re-examining the way film language worked. And I recognized it's not just spoken language, not just dialogue, not just actors. It's also creating emotions and ideas in an audience with a composition, with a camera movement, with lighting. And I loved it. Saw a film called Days of Heaven, which affected me profoundly. Shot some huge music videos and commercials that led to Water for Chocolate, which became the highest grossing foreign language film of all time. Led to Monster, which won an Oscar, and all the rest of it. So it was a journey that I didn't anticipate taking, but that I took. So the same thing with getting back into directing. After Monster's success, people said, "Well, you were trained as a director, as a writer. Have you thought about going back to it?" And I didn't really want to, because most directors have to work for about 7 years getting their projects mounted before the film sees the screen. 7 years is a long time of not getting a film out or made. And sometimes those 7 years are for naught and you get nothing made. So to work that little and then be working with money all the time, because that's what you're doing most of those 7 years is trying to raise money. Of course, you're writing a script and you're casting, but mainly you're trying to raise money. To spend 7 years of your life trying to raise money, to have 6 minutes of joy shooting, 10 weeks of editing, and then put it out to the world to have critics potentially eviscerate your work didn't seem to me like a lot of fun. But I was also anxious to have the opportunity to control all the creative aspects of the production. I knew that I could speak in visual language with camera movement and composition and lighting. I knew that I could write, and I had directed theater for a long time. But to combine all those things together, to orchestrate them, to control the interaction from one area of creative expression to another, really was an exciting prospect to me. And that's how I came to write Decoding Annie Parker with my son, Adam Bernstein.
Yeah.
And we put the script out to the world. It got to Helen Hunt, who loved it. And I signed Helen Hunt to do a film, and she's had won an Oscar. And then Samantha Morton, two Oscar nominations, read the script and loved it. Then Corey Stoll, then Aaron Paul, Rashida Jones. It was just a huge cast. And then the film made a lot of money for a lot of people. We raised a lot of money for charity, and we got a lot of information out there. So it was different, but I was in a position of privilege for 30 years sitting next to great directors, Jon Favreau, Patty Jenkins, others, the Wayans, and watching them direct. And by watching other people direct up close as a cinematographer, and then setting up the cameras for those same directors, and then seeing the edit and the product of what you shot, and watching actors taking notes from directors, it's the ultimate 30-year film school to prepare you to be a director. And for me, that was ideal and a natural transition that led, of course, to Last Call with John Malkovich, that led to my new film GRQ. So it was a kind of a oddly natural progression.
Okay, okay. Yeah. And speaking of GRQ, that's like typically this podcast is formed around pre-gaming movies that have not come out yet and hyping up movies that are on the mins of coming soon. And I wanted to speak specifically about that book that is currently when is GRQ coming out to, like, I know it's already been filmed. When is it coming out to theaters?
Right. So the film was finished earlier this year. Will be coming out in the spring of next year. We were thinking about releasing it this year, but then something strange happened. The novel on which it's based, which I wrote, GRQ, which was originally kind of a very kind of artsy novel. It was written in free verse, and it was very, very short, and it was meant to come out after the film. But a publisher's read it, got very excited by it, a company called Fly on the Wall Press in the UK. They rushed the publication, and then we had these spectacular sales, and then these incredible reviews. We won the Literary Titan Awards. We've got all these 5-star reviews on Amazon, on Goodreads, on Barnes and Noble, on Waterson's, and it's sometimes funny how life happens. When we shot Water for Chocolate, everyone presumed the film would be seen by 4 people and would disappear, and became the highest grossing foreign language film of all time. When we shot Monster, everyone, because it went on to win an Oscar and make $100 million, everyone presumed it was an instant success. In fact, no one would buy the film when Monster was finished. No one would buy it. No one wanted a film about a woman serial killer.
Really?
So when we did Waterboy, it was anticipated that it would make its money back plus a little, and it went on to make $1 billion. That's with a B, dollars. When we did White Chicks, it got terrible reviews, and the presumption was the film wouldn't do very well. And now, whenever I speak publicly at a university or some event, what's the first question about my career? Not about Monster, which won an Oscar, always about White Chicks, which didn't win an Oscar, but
Right.
it was a great movie. Or Half Baked. I pretty much know my audiences when I speak colleges. They're either going to like Monster, Half Baked, Waterboy, or the Noah Baumbach movies. I got pretty much it covered. Anyone between 16 and 30, I know which of my films are going to like. So The Dope is the Back, going to love Half Baked, and so on. So none of these things were anticipated. And despite all the science and the marketing people and the executives who study these things, no one was quite certain what would happen to these projects. And they always had, a predetermined destination that the experts said that it would achieve, and it always achieves something different. In each of those cases, something much better. The
Hmm.
same thing with the book. We presume the book would sell a couple hundred copies, and people would be interested in it after they saw the movie. In fact, we've sold thousands of copies, a thousand of copies, and the reviews are through the roof and winning awards. And now people are saying, I think rightfully, talk about natural progressions. It's the best thing that I've done creatively. For all those films I've done and all those films I've made, the book is the thing that turned out to be most satisfying and the best reviews I've had in my life. I get Monster got pretty great reviews too, but that was a collective effort. A lot of people worked on Monster. I was just the cinematographer chest. SWAT obviously made a lot of money, but I was the action cinematographer on that. But this was just me and my ideas, and people are loving it. And maybe it's because it's about crypto and blockchain. Maybe it's because about people getting into deep financial trouble. I don't know why it's so popular, but the book's doing great. So that's to delay the release of the film. We want the book to have a run. And then when we've got a huge audience from the book, then we'll tease the release of the film, then we'll release it.
Okay, hey, that's all. Well, first off, I'm glad to hear that you're finding like all this success within like the reviews and just people like getting to this book and really like enjoying it. Just from the brief synopsis, it pulled me in because I am someone that I'm a lot more calculated now, but I'm someone that is a bad risk taker when it comes to terrible money decisions and trying to do things. And
You and me both, brother. Yeah.
yeah, so reading that, I was like, oh, okay, this I used to struggle with gambling as well, but that's in the past. But it reminded me immediately of the feeling I got. Have you ever seen the movie Uncut Gems?
Oh, a film I consider a masterpiece because I've worked with Adam. One of the great performances in film I think ever. The tensions in that movie are superb. It's beautifully written, beautifully directed, beautifully realized. Yeah, and yes, it's my film. My book is not a million miles from that. Again, about people making bad financial decisions for sure,
Yeah.
as we all do, by the way.
Yeah, and it's all like part of the learning experience of life. But it reminded me immediately put me like back in the theater chair of watching that movie because like as someone who used to have a gambling issue that it's under control now, but in the past it used to be where that movie was like a documentary to me where like when he's dealing with these issues of owing people money or having to go run over here to do this before this game starts and make this bet, my heart was racing the entire time because I'm like, I've lived these moments. I've been there with this, like in this situation, maybe
Yeah.
not to the stakes that are high as this person is, but I've been there. So reading like the synopsis.
GRQ is very, I mean, it's a comedy book, but it's also a thriller. Going to those very issues, Richard, because there is an excitement when we put ourselves in danger. You know, it's no accident that so many of us put ourselves in danger. Some people ski down hills or snowboard very, very quickly. Some people skydive. Some people enter into tumultuous relationships with people they know to be crazy. Some people take drugs. Some people drive cars too quickly. Some people drink. We are concerned about in our nature ennui, about being bored, about
Yeah.
life is not stimulating enough. So we like risk because it's exciting. And this is about a character who makes a series of bad judgments. But I think you go to an important point that underneath those bad judgments that he makes may be the desire to embrace the chaos that is a conscious experience of life because it makes life more exciting when you're at risk. And he not only puts himself at risk, but everyone he knows at risk. So halfway through the book, even I, who've read it obviously many times, but wrote it, am annoyed with him, and then very, very tense, and then in the end rooting for him to succeed. Because no matter how badly a person behaves, if there's a essential decency or a commonality of spirit, if we recognize bits of ourselves in a character, we're rooting for them to succeed.
Yeah.
Hitchcock teaches us that. Hitchcock creates some awful characters, but he puts them in situations that we have all universally experienced, and therefore who we root for.
Yeah, rooting for that moment of him just like it's because it's all set in like a 24-hour period, the like the book
It's
and the film.
all over one day. He is going to have his house repossessed.
Oh,
He's got to get all the money back to pay for his house, and someone convinces him to invest everything he's got and everything his family's got, everything his friends got in one crypto play, one crypto bit of currency, and it's all likely to be successful because there's a famous filmmaker that's about to appear on television about a film he's making about crypto, about the same crypto coin. and the film is called GRQ, and the filmmaker that's appearing on television in the book is Steven Bernstein. So I
Oh,
appear in my own book, announcing my own book and my own film about my own characters that appear in the book. So it's a meta within a meta within a meta, and so a lot of fun in the movie. I'm in the movie, but I don't play myself. I have someone else playing Steve Bernstein, playing somebody else. So
oh,
it's a wild, wild ride. A bit Charlie Kaufman-like, a bit like being John Malkovich. Of course, I worked with John, and a bit like uh, a lot of other Charlie Kaufman movies. Adaptation, another great example. And it's fun. It's just a fun book and it's a fun film.
did you have any like final casting calls on this, like the person playing you? Like, did you?
Yeah, I directed, so of course I cast it.
Yeah,
So yeah, we cast people, and then I had them play me, which was weird because I was in the room as they were playing me.
right. How
So
did that feel?
well, they didn't play me in the end. They played a version that they felt would be like a director, and the guy who actually played me made some great choices. And God, I hope I'm not like me in the movie. But the important thing is that this idea of switching identities, one person to another, this sense of universal identities, how we're all different, but we're all the same. That's why it was so important to have these different characters playing each other and even someone else playing me. So we recognize that even though it's not me, it's me. And even though our hero is gambling on things and he's always pretending to be somebody else. And in that sense, it's a collective experience. The great thing about art is we see ourselves in the art, and I'm hoping that people will see themselves in these characters, however crazy and wild they behave.
I think it's with especially with crypto too now, like the uprise of crypto. I think it is something that we will be able to relate more in terms of like risking your livelihood for a potential comfortability that is not attainable in other situations elsewhere. So I think it is something that can be like relatable to the crowd
Yeah.
that goes to the
Well, you
movies
mentioned
too.
gambling and you mentioned crypto. I spoke to, because I researched this book forever, some of the leading specialists, experts in cryptocurrency. And I said, so what makes the price go up and down? And the
Mhm.
three biggest experts I spoke to all said, I don't know.
That's wild.
It's just, it's publicity, it's enthusiasm, it's rumors, but there's no underlying fundamental metric that determines the price. So you could research all you want about crypto. You could learn everything you want about the crypto exchanges and Ethereum or whatever else you're likely to invest in. That doesn't make you any more qualified than someone who just takes a pin and sticks it a number on a date and decides to invest at that time. It's wholly arbitrary. Now, I think that's significant. I think goes to one, the excitement that you mentioned before that what gambling is. It's like buying a lottery ticket. We're mostly going to lose lottery tickets, but someone's going to win. So
Right.
there's that vague excitement or fantasy of what we're going to do with California. They just had a 1 point something billion-dollar draw here, and somebody won the Powerball. So,
Hey.
um, and we all hoped that we were going to win the Powerball, but we didn't. And I think that's what happens with crypto is we invest a lot of little. It's become much easier to invest than it was before. You can do it on your phone. And then, yeah, you'll probably lose, but the possibility that you might win, the possibility that there'll be some, bit of epiphany, that there'll be a magical moment where everything is, all your dreams are realized, makes it easier to carry on because whatever we can anticipate when we start our day, all the bills and the misery and the pain and the illnesses and whatever else we're dealing with, that is always there. But if
Yeah.
we bought a lottery ticket or if we've invested in crypto, something seemingly magical could happen by the end of our day, and the course of our lives could be forever altered. And I think that's kind of what this is about, this book, about how we want to alter the course of our lives, how we want to be a magical or divine intervention, and how we believe in the end in the power of a happenstance or coincidence or accident. And that makes life a much easier place to inhabit.
Well, it's like it is worrisome a little bit too that like the top three crypto like experts are all like, oh, we don't know why it like goes up or goes down. So it I've always like coming in with like the heavy gambling background, I've always gone into investing as like, oh, isn't that like a form of gambling? Because that always seemed very similar to me as like the variances of like investing in stocks and or just like player prop betting on a baseball game or whatnot. So like hearing the crypto graphs are like changed by not it's not really known by what it's actually like very worrisome to me, but it is something that is up and coming in this world. It's like you said, it's easy to access now. Like I can go buy crypto now on Cash App for random change. So it is
Yeah,
something that's just
yeah,
constantly
and that's
evolving.
kind of dangerous. I mean, people can do it, but particularly with impulse and compulsion, if you make the exercise of a compulsion easier, are we making our world better? But
Hmm.
I'll tell you, if you're having a bad day and you wake up, you say, "Oh, you know what, I'll put $100 in crypto and see what happens," and it goes up 20 points by the end, you feel you had a good day,
Right.
So that's I guess part of its function and its attraction. And there are people making lots of money on crypto. Maybe even people in politics are making a lot of money on crypto. Who's to say? But
Right.
it was worth exploring, and I always thought that what makes life particularly interesting is not only the nature of gambling, but what we gamble with. And in this particular instance, someone's gambling with everything in his life.
Yeah.
So does gambling become better when the stakes are higher and you could lose everything? Certainly in my story, the character gambles absolutely everything he's got. He's gambling on his marriage. He's gambling on all his savings, his wife's savings, his family's savings, everything on this one play. And then we go for this wild ride over this 146-page, very short novel. As crypto goes up, it goes down. There's earthquakes. There's promises of money that seem going to be delivered. Steve Bernstein makes this big announcement about the movie. He doesn't say what's anticipated he's going to say. It's a wild ride, and I think that it's worthy of examination because our love for crypto is separate from our love of money. I think it has to do with our love of danger.
Mm. And that does make sense because like you were saying, it's he's investing or he's risking his whole like livelihood in this instance. When when I would go like gamble back in the day, I knew I was what I was like risking and I knew I was putting myself in a deeper hole, but I was also like, well, yeah, I can be like I can owe this much money on my bills, but I can at least come back from this if I can win big and have money for like these bills and the next bills. So it was always like the expectations of what if, but it was at the same time I knew I was only like pulling myself deeper into the hole by myself. Having a family and dragging like bringing them down with you or making these decisions with them involved like it brings like another kind of fear to me because like it was tough for me to do this stuff knowing I was pulling myself into a hole or now knowing this character is bringing like his
Yeah.
family and like all his house and everything into it. Ooh.
Right, but it's fun. It's as tense as it is, because he does such crazy, wild shit. It's quite funny at times. My favorite scene that I wrote was him arguing with her mortgage company, and the mortgage company said, "We sent you all these letters, And he goes, "You sure you sent the right email? Let me just check the email." Because the stuff that we say when we're in trouble, I find a source of great comedy. So that's some of the things that I examine. Look at them, and obviously because the awards we're getting, so on, it's people are responding, not because necessarily I'm a great writer, but because the experience is so, I think, universal.
Right, right.
And
And
I'm a great writer.
that also helps with it. Well, like speaking of your writing too, I've been listening to like a couple of podcasts and stuff, and I heard that when you first started off, you were with BBC working with their like music videos, and you kind of had more of a free range control in writing on that aspect.
A little bit different. I started BBC absolutely on the training program, but then they weren't even music videos. The music videos were happening in London at the time. There were these people called A&R men who would try to find bands that they thought might be successful. They worked for the record companies, and there are always more bands than there are A&R men. So they or R&A women, R&A people. So they had to have a more effective mechanism to see what the band looked like when they're performing live. So someone had the idea, I got him, John Roseman, to record the bands just in front of like a white sheet or a green screen, put it on what was then popular was 3/4 inch video, give it to the record company could see the video and say, let's sign this band. And then what happened was we began making those videos a little bit more complicated. We were going out in the streets. We then started adding extras. The lighting became more complicated. There were stories that were involved. And then a few years later, along came Duran Duran, Girls on Film, and huge £1 million like modern money, $3 million videos with huge sets and effects and stunt people and models and all the rest of it. And now it's, of course, dissipated again. But in those days, it was a great period of experimentation because, particularly as a cinematographer, but also as a director, there were no rules about what the right way to shoot a music video was. It could be shot any which way. So we would test the limits. I would use multiple cameras. I would shoot on 16 millimeter, 35 millimeter, shot on a Fisher Price toy camera, entire music video on that, shot it with stills, then animated it, mixed animation with shooting, underexposed, overexposed, used smoke. No one used to smoke really before music videos came along. And then everyone began using smoke.
Mhm.
First was cracker oil, which is quite dangerous and deadly, but creates great smoke. And then it was foggers, like the Roscoe foggers and so on. And then the reason you smoke is it shows light, so you backlight the smoke, get these spectacular looks. And that was that kind of 80s music video look, which influenced all films that followed. So you take that with more classical training and writing that I had at the BBC, and I had a really good background on cinematic language, both written language, the language of actors, but then also the photographic language, which is so central to the understanding of film.
How do you feel that um that's from where you started off at, from the music videos and stuff like that, to where you appear now and like coming out with it's already out, GRQ Get Rich Quickly, the novel, but going from that into then directing that novel into a film, like how do you feel like you've come from all this
Well,
distance?
the great thing is I realize now that by intention or not, everything was like an add a seat and everything was preparation for my future. I would not be as good a director as I am if I'm a good director had I not had the opportunity to work with a great many other directors, but as a cinematographer, watching them work, watching both their successes and their failures and their decision-making process. And I looked at certain directors, I admired the way they worked. I recognized that they created an atmosphere on set that was conducive to creative expression. It was a set that was free of criticism, that was nurturing and supportive. And I said, okay, well, if I direct, that's what I'm going to do. I looked at the way they gave notes to actors. It was always, action verbs and some specific things that were playable. So you didn't just give an actor a vague note like be better or bigger. You would give them something that was very specific that they could undertake. And you do a lot of backstory. I worked with actors and directors who like to prepare a lot by creating the backstory of their characters. So I learned to do that. But then I also learned that you don't tell a story entirely with dialogue or with performance, that the way you light a set is very important in creating a feeling in an audience. The way the camera moves, if I push a camera in very, very slowly to a close-up of a character, that creates a sense that something significant has happened, even without a very powerful performance. I learned that production design could affect an audience perception of action. I learned that editing, whether you edit shots very, very quickly or you hold a shot for much longer, affects the audience perception of action and their experience of the film. So the great thing about all these years of experience and working in music videos and working as a writer and working in theater and working on the technical side and the creative side and watching other people at the top of their field working is uh, you combine all those things together for creating a film that is the most effective and successful. And had I not had the opportunity to learn about lighting and camera movement and production design and editing and directing and performance and all those things from my separate individual career choices, as it were, either observing them or doing them myself, I would not have been able to master the craft so that when I'm on a set, I know how I want to use the camera. I know what to say to a production designer. I know what note to give to an actor, and I know what notes to give to my editors. It's learning to direct takes a long time, and I admire when people can do it when they're really young, and they're very, very special. But I've had the opportunity to take a long time to learn my particular craft, and
Mm.
for me, it was right. I don't think I would be as good a writer in my 20s as I am now. I don't think I would have directed as well in my 20s as I do now. And I don't think that I would be able to manage and lead a crew as well as I do now had I not had all these years of experience.
Well, I appreciate you for sharing that information because for me, someone who's an amateur in film and I just like to go watch movies as a passion of mine, it always blew my mind seeing as when a Brad Pitt of the world comes out and becomes a director, and understanding your process and your experience and your livelihood of living through it, it's easier to see why people like these actors that are on the sets of all these movies are learning and turn into great directors. I want to mention, for instance, Jordan Peele, who was into comedy and came out to like create this crazy stuff. So it's really cool to hear your experience with it, to be able to see where you were able to pick up bits and pieces like along the way. But getting back to GRQ, do you feel like you had to change a lot going from novel to film?
Oh, great question. They work in two different ways, the novel and the film. In film, we very often say show, don't tell, that the image is more powerful than the spoken word in a movie. And that's partially true. Whenever a character is speaking, it becomes a reductions exercise. And the more they speak, the less they mean. And that's the idea. You narrow meanings down by being descriptive in your speaking. When you create an image, just an image, you just hold on a close-up of a face looking somewhere. That image is by its nature enigmatic because we don't explain it. We witness it, we experience it, we project feelings onto what we're seeing, but we're not ever sure of exactly what the filmmaker is representing. So when we made the film of GRQ, much more had to do with visual elements and with uncertainty, and us trying to divine what a character was thinking without actually being completely sure. And that's a very powerful mechanism in film. The great thing about the book was it allowed me to explore character in much more detail, and I get into the backstory of why this guy was behaving in the way that he was. And the interesting thing about backstory is it makes a character much more sympathetic. When we know anyone's story, we're more inclined to sympathize with it. For people who are sports fans, when the reason you probably support your local team isn't just because they're from the city that you're from, or you wore the uniform when you played in Little League or whatever. It's to do with the local press running stories about all the players. So
Right.
you know who had the tragedy when they were young. You know who had overcome adversity. You know who's popular among other players. You know who hunts and fishes or speaks foreign languages or whatever it is. And the more you know about a person, the more you're ultimately likely to care about them. And that's why writing a book is so fascinating about a character who can appear initially unsympathetic, but then in the fragmentary way that I examine people, we look at events from his past and he becomes more and more and more sympathetic, as all of us are sympathetic if you just knew our stories. That's the thing
Exactly. Yeah.
about when you learn someone's stories, you feel bad for them and sorry for them. It's easy to dislike someone you know nothing about. When they just represent an idea, you can dislike that idea. But when you get to know the individual and know their traumas and their suffering and their needs and their desire for love and who they love and the sacrifices they made and even their misbegotten thinking, which is well-intentioned but maybe misguided, then we care about them. And that's what I loved about the novel was my ability to get into backstory, whereas the images of the film, I think equally powerful and evocative, but more to do with the enigmatic and uncertain, whereas the book is more to do with a careful examination of character. I don't know how I could do one without the other. I would say to every young writer, you should never try to write a screenplay before you've written the book, because
Hmm.
when you've written the book or the novel about the characters, you know their backstory, you know these characters, you can anticipate behaviors, and then the script just flows from that more naturally. If you try to write a screenplay before you know who your characters are, then you can write all about story, but you can write very little about character because you haven't really learned who the character is. I think to learn who the character is, you've got another backstory.
Right. Right. Okay. So speaking of like specifically the characters, I saw you got Greg, Gert, Greg German and Mina Savari to come in and work on this project and be your lead actor and actresses. How did you feel working with them was with this movie?
Well, Greg German and Mina were both great and very accomplished actors. Of course, Mina was in American Beauty. Greg was in Ally McBeal and a variety of other shows, and just really very good actors. I spent a long time casting my films, and I don't cast in a traditional way. In that, when I was working with Marion Vanu, I was one of the great casting directors ever on Decoding Annie Parker. When I was working on Last Call, again, great casting director, and on this film, I bring actors in and I talk to them.
Hmm.
I don't have them do line readings. I'm not interested in whether they can exactly realize the characters I envisioned it. Rather, I'm interested in the instrument that is themselves, whether they can access a creative imagination within them that would allow us together to evolve the character into something full and interesting. So when I met with Mina, I connected with her immediately. She understood who she thought the character was. I told her who I thought the character was. We discussed it, and there was a chemistry there, and I knew right away that we would evolve it in something special. That's what I'm looking for, is a fellow worker who I can go on a journey with and discover the character in an environment that is conducive to that discovery.
Mm,
Same thing with Greg. He just knew who the character was, highly intellectual, vast experienced person, and he and I again could combine. So same with John Malkovich on Last Call. When I met John, we didn't talk much about the script, but we talked about bigger ideas. And when I understood that John was a great intellectual and had scenes to draw on and a great understanding of the craft, I knew that he and Tony Hale was also in that film, and Risa Fons, who was in that film, Rodrigo Santoro was in that film, all worked in their own individual way to discover the character rather than thinking we knew who the character was at the beginning. So that's why it was so satisfying to work with these particular actors in this film. And we shot on a very short schedule. We shot very, very quickly. I now have evolved a methodology where I shoot very, very quickly. And I use three, four, five cameras at the same time. I use a lot of improvisation. If an actor stumbles, I just keep going. I love the stumbles. I love the
mm,
imperfections because it's just an authenticity of the character that you wouldn't otherwise recognize if the character was word perfect.
right.
So the actors lean into this, lean into the improvisation. They work closely with me. I choose an ensemble cast that will create a vision shared with me and the other members of the crew. And Mina and Greg were perfect for that.
Hey. All right, all right. It, so it's awesome to hear like your casting, like the way you go about casting, because I know, well, actually I don't know, but like from my perspective, it seems like it's usually the hottest star at the time or someone who's doing well in the box office that seems to get like a lot of these important roles at like the top movies. So it's cool to hear like a fresh perspective of like being able to just have a conversation with someone and get to know them and just to see if there would be a fit for like what you're trying to accomplish on paper. But GRQ deals with like ambition, desperation, and family under pressure. Why do you think these themes are so timely in our world right now?
Well, finance tragically is at the center of all our lives all the time, unless we're born to a trust or billions of dollars. So, and we live in a capitalism, and I make movies that require a lot of money to make. So, money's at the center of our lives, and it affects us in a million different ways. We think about love and all the other things that also influence the way that we feel. But if we think that money is not part of every single decision we make, we're misguided. So I wanted to focus on that and what it does to our dynamic, particularly in marriages, because marriages are based on love, but they end up as business enterprises. We buy things, we sell things together, we run out of money, we have more money, and that affects the dynamic of the relationship. And very often, I think they say most marriages fail because of arguments about money.
Mm,
So I thought that was worthy of an examination. I also think that family is hugely important, and I think the people who are happiest are the ones who have a sense of purpose and have a feeling of being loved, and who in themselves love in turn, which is very important. You mix that together with the dynamics of bad financial decisions, and you can have decent people in bad places, or bad people doing things that do good people damage. And then you have good people doing themselves damage inadvertently. I think all those things go to the very nature and essence of life. As I said at the beginning of this talk, we do films for different reasons, sometimes to just amuse. I don't think, Half Baked is a profound examination of the human condition, but it's okay because people laugh, and it's easier to get through life if you're laughing, I would think. But sometimes the artist, the writer, in this case, this artist, wants to examine the nature of our shared human condition, why we make bad choices,
mm,
how we find the ability to forgive or to apologize, how we survive our bad judgment, how we deal with other people's judgment, how we deal with death, which is also in the film,
oh.
and how it's all, to my mind, a grand comedy. As tragic as it is, it's also profoundly funny.
And how like because it keeps getting back to me to the point that is all like the whole thing takes place in one day. Was it? Was it intense for you to like try and film that like intensity for everything happening like all in one day?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously didn't shoot it in one day, but we
Right.
shot a
Okay.
much longer period of time. But yes, we one of the devices that I use in the film is this, and in the book is this idea of a ticking clock. That's the thing that creates drama, is that you have to have an obstacle that you have to overcome, and you have to overcome it with a certain amount of time. That's what creates films that and books that are effective. And we very much have a ticking clock. He's got 7 hours to save everything. And there isn't a moment in the book where you don't feel that he's at risk. And that's why it works so effectively as a thriller, because you have a sense that time is racing forward and he's still making bad judgments and things are still getting worse.
Okay. All right. See, I'm excited for that. Like that, just that the whole
I'm anxious for you to
time.
see it. I think you'll love it. Yeah.
If someone has, okay, so for the people who have like never, if someone has never read GRQ, the book, what's one thing that you want them to be able to see going on by viewing the film?
Well, I think the film exists independently of the book, although better if you did read a book, but it exists actually independently. I think that the theme is that this is a character making a lot of bad judgments, like we all do. This is a character who has needs, like we all do. This is a person in desperate situations, taking desperate measures to save himself, and we've all been there. We root for him to overcome the cruel machinations of the mechanism of the world in which we live. So, mortgage brokers and debt collectors and wives and friends and people we borrowed money from, and all those situations that we put ourselves in, painting ourselves into that great philosophic collective corner, and then trying to figure a way to wheedle out. When we see someone else doing it, like in a movie or in a book, we see ourselves in that and we see their madness and we see their kindness and we see their need. And that's what film is meant to do, is to say that these characters on the screen are like you. And you get a chance to be in a position of privilege and observe their behavior and judge it. And most of all, learn from it and enjoy it and say, okay, I remember that film and I know what that person did and I'm not going to do the same thing. Someone once said you meet many more people through film and television than you ever meet in your own life. So this is an opportunity to meet people who are doing some very desperate things that you might do and might do it in a way different than you might have done. And maybe it's good that you don't do what they did.
Right. And it blows my mind too that we have these instances in life where we may be pinned up against a wall and we need to make one of these decisions or a couple of these decisions, and it can be eventually labeled back from an outsider's perspective of, oh, this was like what puts you in the ground, so to speak. So it's wild that your whole who you are as a person, as an entity, as a complete, can be judged completely just off of one of your poor decisions and put into that whole category.
No question. No question. But we all make poor decisions. And we don't make poor decisions because we want to make poor decisions. We sometimes make poor decisions and thinking that they're great decisions. I mean, I know people who actually think that when they buy a lottery ticket, the chance of their life improving has changed. And statistically, it probably hasn't. I know people who invested a lot of money in crypto, thinking that they had read an article that assured them that Ethereum was going to double or whatever.
Mm,
And Ethereum has gone up. It may go down again, but it's gone up.
right.
And a lot of people have made money on crypto. It doesn't mean they're right. This is the interesting thing, is that because you've had success in crypto, might mean you're right for the period that you've had success, but it could all collapse tomorrow.
Mm,
That's its nature. And we don't want to believe that. We want to think that we've gamed the system, that we've worked out, that we know how it works. And that's how we are in life as well. That we want to think that we think the things we know how things work. We don't always. And that's the wonder and majesty of our lives, is that they have their own momentum that will take in a direction that it chooses to go, and we have little control over. That's part of the great adventure of it all, and that's the tragedy of it all.
yeah, yeah, and what a tragedy is that it is that time to think that you can control more than your access to be able to control in this world. But what's after like GRQ comes out, what's next for you?
Well, I'm doing a one-man show, which is seven versions of me on stage at the same time arguing with myself about the
Oh,
making of GRQ. We're doing that, and that'll be shot soon. I'm writing a new screenplay, which is about some events happening in the UK. I'm writing a TV show. I'm starting in October. I've got a new book out called A Book of Tens, which is about things that I've learned from working on film sets about lighting, about camera, about directing, about acting, about producing, about production management. That comes out next week. So that'll be a cool book for people to get. And then I've got a book from Routledge, which is a big textbook about creative process, which comes out at the end of the year. And we're working with a blockchain company about having a treasure hunt built around the film where people can get a $250,000 prize by figuring out where our secret necklace, which is featured in the film, is buried or virtually buried. And
that's
that'll be happening
awesome.
next month or two. So it's a really busy end of the year coming up.
Okay, so that's going to be tied with the release of the film, and it's like
Correct.
that is so okay. That's a great idea. See, that's what I love. One thing I feel like it's been getting better this year, but like for advertising and just release for films that do things behind the scenes, like such as being able to uncover blockchain with a hidden detail in the movie that revolves around cryptocurrency is like amazing to me and is inspires creativity in the world, which sometimes I feel like we need a little bit more of that.
You're
Blockchain.
absolutely right.
I know we're running a little low on time here, so I got a couple more questions for you. But do you feel like researching or like finding out more information for writing this book and then directing the film, do you feel like it's inspired you more to get into crypto or kind of scared you a little bit away from it?
No, no, I don't think it's inspired me to invest more in crypto. Look, you put money in crypto, you may make money. You may make a
Right,
lot of money or you may lose everything. And that may be something that turns you on. And if it turns you on and makes life more bearable, then by all means do it. But if you think you figured it out and you're definitely going to make money in crypto, then I would say think again. It doesn't mean you won't, but it doesn't mean you will either. But
right,
again, that's what life is that, I encourage my actors, I encourage my crew, I encourage every person I creatively collaborate with to take huge risks. Does the risk mean that you'll have certain success? No. But our best decisions as a result of taking huge risks and our worst decisions are a result of taking huge risks. But if we're going to live life fully and we want to live our life, not observe it, then take risks.
yeah, and that is great advice because I know nowadays we can get we get scared of so many things these days. I'm scared of failure, and even for like this, for me, podcasting, it was something that I've always wanted to do, but it was just something that I wanted to do for fun, and it was something that I was scared to start because like, who wants to listen to some random person talking about movies? But here we are talking about movies and a movie coming out that was a book, and it's amazing to me because it's all I agree with you 100%. It's all about taking risks. You just got to be able to talk over talk those voices of negativity that may occur in your head at times. All right, and then I think that's pretty much it about the pregame for GRQ. So the goal of the pregame is to hype people up for movies that are coming out to kind of get an interest into that movie. Is there a movie that you've seen recently or that you can remember that's every time you see it, it hypes you up to get into a specific mood?
Look, I see a lot of movies, I love a lot of movies. I love Formula One this year because of
Ooh.
the visceral energy of it. I thought that was delightful. Sorry, Baby is an interesting film. There are films in the past that I watch over and over again. I still always love Actually because it's kind of a romantic dream about the nature of the way people behave. I wish people behaved that way. They don't, but the film makes you believe it for a second. Um, you mentioned Uncut Gems. I think it's a masterpiece of a film, in just in terms of Pure the Safdie brothers, who've got a new film out at Venice at the moment, are just great. I think very special to look at. I love all sorts of films for a variety of different reasons. I just saw um, at Aliens, which a friend of mine was the producer of Gale and Hurd, and it was at the Egyptian Theater here in Los Angeles, on a big screen. And Gail spoke afterwards, and we I hung out with the effects people from the film, and that was special. And you forget how good that movie is, but it's virtually a perfect film.
Mm.
So I enjoy that very much. Films are great, and films are great on a big screen. And I hope that after the kind of catastrophe of the past year, with all that's happening with streamers, people will start going back to cinemas because when you see a great film on a big screen, like Formula One's a great example, there's very little else like it.
Yeah. And
I'll tell you, Nobody 2, if you haven't seen that, surprisingly good movie.
really,
Really pure entertainment, funny, and just delightful. I mean, not anything of significance, but a delightful film to see.
okay, that's good to know because I remember walking into the first one and enjoying that one, and this one kind of looked like another version of that. But it's good to
Yeah,
know that it's good
same
to.
humor, same quality. Yeah.
Okay, okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you. I just want to say thank you again, Mr. Stephen
No, my
Bernstein,
great pleasure.
for
Do
dropping
make sure
by.
you let everyone know that the book can be got,
Yes,
Amazon, and you're gonna do all that, yeah.
and you can find it on Amazon.
And good bookstores, and or you go to my Instagram page, which is Steven Bernstein, director writer, and there's a link there that could take you to the book. We do a podcast called Filmmaker and Fans, which every week we talk about big issues to do with creative process in film. And The Instagram page I mentioned, and the book, and the film comes out next year. And I want to give back. I've been doing this for a long time. That's why I do these podcasts. That's why I do my own podcast. That's why I do that Instagram page, Steve Bernstein, director, writer. And every day I post something of value there. But most of all, right now, we're very excited about how well the book's doing. I want to get in many people's hands as possible. I want them to read it. I want them to review it. It's rare that independent books do as well as this one's doing, and I'm really enjoying the ride. So let's see what happens.
Yeah. Again, congratulations on the success of this
My
book.
great pleasure. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Richard.
All right.
Thank you, brother.
And that is going to be the end of this podcast episode. Again, a massive shout out to Mr. Steven Bernstein for joining us on the podcast today. It was something I was looking forward to. I was extremely excited to be able to pick the brain of the great Steven Bernstein and just the intelligence and just the experience that he's able to share with us and show us a little bit of his life and to show us a little bit of his thought process about cinematography, writing, directing, and being an author. So again, shout out to Mr. Steven Bernstein, and thank you all for listening to this episode. Hope it has touched you as it has touched me, and hope you have a great day. God bless. Thank you for listening, and as always, all right, the movie is starting.